Hello and welcome to the Inner Critic to Inner Champion Masterclass. If you haven't already, you can see just below, click the link, you can download a workbook to accompany you through this masterclass. I'm super excited that you're here today with me, and we're going to have a look at the real root of negative self-talk so you can break free of it and awaken to the love that you are. I'm going to share some of my spiritual experiences with you, some of my own awakening journey, and some of the methods and processes which have really helped me to quiet that voice that was driving me mad. So if you resonate with that, you're in the right place. If your negative self-talk is driving you mad, upsetting you, you're in the right place. So my name is Wendy Harrington. If we haven't met before, it's lovely to meet you. And I help people to wake up to who they really are so they can shift from fear and doubt to love, peace, and certainty. And as I said, I'm going to share some of my spiritual experiences, and we're going to look at what I call the awakening puzzle. Now, my first experience happened in 1990 when I was 19 years old, and I had watched a program called Red Nose Day, which was where I live in the UK, and a bunch of the musicians would get together, the musical celebrities, and do a fundraiser for charity to raise money for children that were starving in Africa. And for me, it was touched my heart so deeply. I would donate some money. And I woke in the early hours of the next morning with this very clear thought of like, oh, you will never solve it. No amount of money will ever solve it. It is only a raising in consciousness which will actually transform the problem. And it was crystal clear, that message. It's still like with me now, but I didn't really think that much of it because I didn't really understand what it meant. So let's explore actually what it meant, and that's what we're going to look at as we go through this masterclass together. So the awakening puzzle, there are, for me, these 6 fundamental pieces for us to make a shift from fear to love. And it's a very, very different experience. And so we're going to look at emotional processing. We're going to look at the ego release. We're going to look at energy, faith, forgiveness, and embodiment. Now, this was me in 2001, April of 2001, getting married in Las Vegas to Roland. We all call him Ro. I don't know if you can see in this picture, but I think I hid it with the flowers, but I was 6 months pregnant. And not that long before I got together with Ro, I'd been for a tarot card reading. And there was a moment where the lady had pointed at my lower abdomen and she said, "You have a dark area there. It's mother issues. And if you don't sort it out, you'll be ill." Well, that warning went right over my head. I knew nothing about energy manifesting as disease or, energy in the body or healing or anything like that. And yet, not long after we got married in the June, I found myself here in the intensive care unit. I had had an emergency cesarean section with our daughter who was born 8 weeks early. And then I had contracted necrotizing fasciitis, more commonly known as the flesh-eating disease. And surgeons had to remove my womb, ovaries, and about 2/3 of the flesh on my torso in an attempt to save my life before putting me into a medical coma. I was in a medical coma for 10 days. And then somewhere in that 10 days, I had a near-death experience. Now, the first thing was I was aware that I was out of my body. And I was aware of myself, but I knew I wasn't in my body. And so, that aspect of yourself, it's the same. It's like ageless and timeless, whether you're 5, 15, 25, etc., 50, it just feels the same. So it was that aspect of myself that I'd always been aware of. And I was aware of that, but I was not in my body. And I remember thinking, oh, well, I'm not my body. I exist beyond it. And then I was floating into the most amazing light. There was like this momentum, and I was just surrounded by light. And I was quite happily going. The words will never do it justice, but the peace, the bliss, the serenity. And I could see forms taking shape ahead of me. And all of a sudden, I felt a tug on my arm, and I looked back, and it was Ro. And so I tried to pull him to come with me because I really wanted to go. There was no thought for this earthly life. I was quite happily going wherever that was taking me. And he wouldn't budge. And I heard telepathically, if you come, you must come on your own. And I'm quite stubborn, so I tried to pull him again. wouldn't budge, and the same telepathic message: if you come, you must come on your own. And I didn't want to leave him, and that momentum subsided and then came back into my body. Here's me then. I think that was obviously had been brought round at that point, and that was our dear little Martha here, who was 8 weeks premature, but thankfully always did really well. And so I was in hospital for 3 months in total. And then not long after coming home, I received my first, well, my second actually, because obviously I received that message when I was 19, but hadn't thought anything of it, but received in my first experience of quite a considered amount of automatic writing. So I woke with a sentence in my head. It was on repeat. It would not stop. And eventually I got up to write it down. And as I began to write, the next sentence came, and the next one, and the next one. And then there was an aspect of it where it said that there is love and fear and everything else in between, and you can create from either. And in order to have a different experience, it's really important that you choose love, and you are unwittingly choosing fear. And, you know, it didn't feel like just a message for me. It was like a message for, you know, all of us, for humanity, right? And I remember in that moment, like really committing to like, oh, I will choose love, you know, I will choose this love, and I will create, and I will be really loving. And that was my thought. And I was so curious to know, like, who are we really? Just what is going on here? This glimpse of something greater, this glimpse of love. I don't come from although I went to a Church of England school and was around Christianity, I have not, you know, practiced religion, anything like that. I'd kind of had this thought: we're born, we die, we're dust, that's it. But then suddenly, obviously, had this experience of something more. And so I started to study things. I started to practice meditation and study Tai Chi and Qigong. I did Shiatsu, which is this picture in the middle here, which is a Japanese body therapy that uses the same meridians as acupuncturists use, but you use your hands and your thumbs and fingers instead of needles, and you work the whole body. And I was reading spiritual books, and I also did a psychology degree because I was just like, what is going on with the mind? Like, who are we really? I was just fascinated. And one time when I was doing on a shiatsu training, we were doing a breathing exercise, and we were in a circle doing this breathing exercise, and it made me feel really panicky, and so I stopped. And then at the end, the instructor said, you know, we spoke about what happened, and so I shared that it made me panicky. And he said, well, you know, don't worry about it, like, we're going to go again, just see if you can just keep going and see what happens. So I was breathing and breathing. I felt the same panic, and I kept breathing. And then a memory of when I was in the hospital. So initially I was on a full respirator and everything, but when that that was taken out, and I had an oxygen mask, and I was completely bedridden for probably 10, well, in fact, nearly 3 months actually, just before I went home. And so the nurses would roll me. At that point, the nurses were rolling me to change bedding and things like that. And as they rolled me, the mask fell off, and I totally panicked. I think I thought I was going to die on the spot. And the nurses were amazing. They were like, no, you're fine. And they put the mask back on. But that memory arose in the body. So this was my first like direct experience of realizing, wow, these memories are held in the body. And then I discovered, you know, more and more actually of the memories that are held in the body. So the body is so full of wisdom. And also, you know, it's going to assist us in clearing the things which block the presence of love. Love is always present. It cannot not be when we're talking about unconditional love here. We're not talking about human love. We're talking about pure unconditional love, the source of life itself, God, source, the universe, whatever you may call it, that greater aspect, which is the energy force of life itself. And so it was just really amazing to start discovering myself in a whole different way, and to start discovering that there was energy in the body. I remember doing some Tai Chi as well and feeling this buzzing in my arm, you know, as strong as if I was to hold a mobile phone, and that was buzzing at my arm. And I was like, what is that? And my instructor said, oh, that's your chi, or your ki, your prana, your energy. And I remember I was 30 at the time, and I remember thinking like, wow, that has been there for 30 years, and I had no awareness of it at all. It's just amazing, isn't it? Now, despite bathing in the bliss of unconditional love, I was really struggling. I was struggling with negative self-talk, doubt, a deep sense of unworthiness. I hated my body. I thought it was ugly. I thought Ro hated my body. I couldn't imagine ever feeling comfortable again. And I ended up having an affair because we just distanced. I didn't have the connection with him that I had felt. And that kind of, broke our marriage apart. And I ended up just feeling like absolutely lost and bereft. And it's like I didn't die to be with this person. And yet here we weren't together. It didn't make any sense. And my negative self-talk was in overdrive. And there were moments where, I thought, God, did I make the right decision? That was so beautiful, this love. I could have been in that peace. And yet here I am struggling. And one day I was just journaling and I was like, what is the point of life? Why am I even here? And then out from my pen, and I know it came from the same place as the automatic writing that I'd received before, which was so full of wisdom. And it just said, you are here to help alleviate the suffering of mankind. And at that time I thought, well, I don't know how I'm supposed to do that because I'm suffering. I am suffering so bad. And now at this point on, I see, okay, it was to go on the journey to realize, okay, how do we overcome this deep suffering, this deep struggling? And for me, there was a real depth of self-loathing, guilt and shame, heavy, heavy stuff, right? And so the first thing that came up was amazingly this place. So this is the Oneness University in Chennai in India. And I was very blessed to go there in April of 2008. And this is where I learned emotional processing. The idea that actually, everything is energy. There is greater energy there, loving presence to support us, to heal and transform. We are not alone in this at all. And to discover the wisdom of allowing the emotions in the body and pulling them apart from the experience we're having. So let's talk a bit more about that. So you cannot think greater than how you feel. Think about that for a moment. The emotions, they knock out the logic, don't they? They knock out the reasoning mind. So it is impossible for us to think greater than how we feel. And the feelings, there are many feelings which we are avoiding, and they are the things which keep us stuck. So the real problem is emotional, is not logical. And so invisible veil number 1 is page 3 of your workbook. And emotions are wise guides. Most people think they need to get rid of emotions. They need to, not feel like that, avoid that. But the truth is that really that discomfort, it holds the keys to your absolute liberation, because our emotions show us where we are out of alignment with the truth of our true self, with the truth of love. And, also when it comes to us creating, what it is that we're wanting to create, are we in alignment or not? Because we are powerful, creative beings. So in the workbook, you've got number 1, emotions are feedback, not fact. Emotions are feedback, not fact. Emotions come from inside, not outside. So that's number 2, emotions come from inside, not outside. And number 3, the roots of emotions are beliefs. If I change my beliefs, how I feel will change. And if I change how I feel, then my behavior will change. And if my behavior changes, then my results will change. Wow, I am powerful. So the roots of emotions are beliefs. If I change my beliefs, how I feel will change. If I change how I feel, then my behavior will change. If my behavior changes, then my results will change. Wow, I am powerful. And so from being in, this is page 4 of your workbook, being at the Oneness University and learning the emotional processing, I created a method for it. And I'm going to share it with you today as a 4-step method called the Observer Method. So this is page 4. This is how to transcend your emotions and your ego mind. It's going to be so helpful in finding some peace. So number 1 is own it. Number 2 is stop thinking. Number 3, start feeling. And 4, breathe and observe. So own it, stop thinking. I'll explain that one in a second. Start feeling, breathe and observe. So number 1, own it. You have to get that what you are feeling, your behavior, what you are thinking is all coming from inside of you. You are the one that is at power with it. And it is arising within you because it is within you. Now, commonly, we have, don't we, that the world works from the outside in. Things are happening out there, and that's why I feel like I feel. I certainly know that's how I used to function. And so we want to flip that around to know that actually the world works from the inside out, not the outside in. So what is inside of you is how you respond to things. It's your perception of things. And so if you think about it for a minute, not everybody responds in the same way to the same things, do they? So there must be something going on inside of us. And if we want to see what that is, we have to first off take the responsibility for it, bring it home from outside to inside. Not responsibility for anyone else, just responsible for yourself, for your thoughts, your feelings, your actions, your behaviors. You're responsible for yourself. So first is you have to say, this is arising within me. Then number 2, stop thinking. Now, I know that sounds impossible, and it's not really about stopping thinking. It's about realizing that the thoughts do not have the true wisdom when it comes to your true liberation and what is really going on. Any thoughts, we could think of it like the story, so like the experiences in our life, the story, all of that has a surface level perception of what's really going on. And so as we realize, that does not have the true answers I'm looking for, I'm going to look deeper. And to do that, we're going to come to number 3, where we're going to start feeling. So we're going to use the body. So we're going to use the body to feel the sensations in the body. So the emotions, I invite you to see them as energy sensations in the body. And that you can take the focus and the attention of the mind, the thoughts, and put it into where is this arising in the body? What does it feel like? And then number 4 is you just breathe and observe. There is nothing to do. There's nothing to fix. There's nothing to change. There's nothing to get rid of. And it's interesting. It's like in the awakening journey is much more of a letting go of the false ideas, the misunderstandings and misperceptions that we have, than it is a becoming of anything. Because we already are it. You are love. And yet there's all this stuff in the way. So what we're looking at here is how do we clear the stuff in the way so that we can remember and awaken to this love that is naturally, our true natural state, our divine essence, if you like. And when we're feeling, the other thing with step 2, stop thinking and start feeling, is mostly we have those things meshed together. We have, this thing has happened or it's happening and that's why I feel like this, and we put them together. So we want to pull them apart so we can go, there's the story, and actually the feeling is something else, and I can be with the rawness of the feeling itself, just the energy sensation in the body. Because everything that is arising is not coming from right now. It's coming from the past. It's coming from before. It's coming from stories that have been told for a long time by yourself, which we'll look at right from the beginning of you coming into this world. And then also, things like family lineage, history, culture, we pick up all these things. And so the surface level is why, we can't really, like Einstein said, you can't solve a problem with the same level of thinking that created it. If we're trying to solve it there, is like we're trying to solve the problem with the problem. You could also think of the intellect as the ego self, this version of yourself, but it itself is the problem. It's not bad or wrong. It's just a protective mechanism, but it doesn't have the solutions and the deeper wisdom that you're looking for. That exists within you. So on page 4 of your workbook, then, the key to the observer method is welcoming and not trying to get rid of, change, fix, or do anything. So the key to the observer method is welcoming and not trying to get rid of, change, fix, or do anything. It really is, you're just observing, you're just witnessing energy. And when you do that, it just dissolves all by itself. It's quite miraculous. Avoidance of emotions means that I get trapped because I have the wrong problem. So like we were saying, when we're not willing to feel, and we're just in the thinking mind, because thinking is one of the ways we avoid certain feelings, and then it means that we have the wrong problem. We don't have the real problem, which is why we can't really solve it. So avoidance of emotions means I get trapped because I have the wrong problem. Welcoming emotions means that I can see the real problem, and therefore the solution opens up. And insight creates effortless behavior change. Insight creates effortless behavior change. So we don't realize that there are many deeply buried beliefs in the unconscious, and they're just blind spots to us. We literally are everything we have decided, which is creating our experience. The mind goes all out to protect that. And as Carl Jung said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. So we feel like we have no control over these things, but when we look deeper, we will see what's really going on. Let me share a story with you to help illustrate this. Now, when I was at the Oneness University in India, I was with a friend of mine, and I got into a relationship with a fella just before I had gone away. And I had been messaging him. But although they had said, like, please don't message anybody, this is an internal process. You know, if you don't have to, don't do messages because it takes your awareness outside of yourself. Absolutely true, right? And so first up, I was like, oh, yeah, okay. But then I couldn't help myself but message. My mind was sort of niggling, oh, you need to message and let me know you're here. Then I'd be waiting to see if he'd message me back. This was going on. And my dear friend said to me, she said, don't shoot the messenger, but just consider why you feel the need to text him. And when she said that, I felt like I'd been punched in the guts. My solar plexus was really churning. I felt really uncomfortable. And I didn't say a word. I just walked off, and we were on a break at the time. We were in the dormitory, and I walked down to the meditation hall. And as I was walking down, I felt so uncomfortable, but I was knowing that, okay, the answers are not in your head. My head would kick in with things like, oh, well, you know, she's always got a message because she was, you know, beautiful channel and receiver of messages. But my mind was, you know, well, she's always got something to say. And it was like, no, shh. Like I knew that was just distraction. I knew that wasn't the truth. And I knew it was just trying to, like some kind of avoidance. And I kept coming back to the feeling sensations, coming back to the feeling sensations. Got down to the meditation hall, I sat, I breathed with feeling really, really uncomfortable. And then all of a sudden, this beautiful, gentle voice inside of me said, well, you've been insecure in every other relationship. Why should this one be any different? And it just was so gentle and so loving and so kind. And I saw it. I saw my insecurity, and I'd not seen it before. But it didn't have this is what I mean, is like there's an energy that opens up when we're opening to source itself, God, and also, you know, that's something greater, and allowing ourselves to truly see, like we are so supported. And so the love of that felt so gentle. I didn't feel chastised or told off. It didn't feel like it was wrong. I just was like, oh yeah, I can see that I have been functioning in that. And it almost made me giggle. It was so gentle. And I felt such relief, because that's what was really there. So can you see, you know, if I stay in the thought, we cannot escape the deeper thing, which is really driving the show, if you like, or driving our behavior. And so this deep insecurity is really the thing which is impacting the relationships and how I'm functioning, and the need, the urge, you know, in order like to make sure that this person has heard from me, etc. The negative thinking of like, oh, well, if they don't, they won't know you love them, and various stuff like that. I see this like love addiction almost, where we're looking for love in the wrong place. We're looking for love outside of ourselves, and which I've been doing pretty much most of my life. And so it was just amazing to see. It made me giggle, like I say. I felt so relaxed. I felt so free and joyous and happy. And then the most amazing thing was when I went back to the dormitory later on that evening, I actually couldn't be bothered to send a message or check for a message because I didn't have any reception where I was, and I had to go for quite a bit of a walk, find a building, climb up to the top onto the roof, wave my phone around to find some reception. And all of that urge had gone. So it's quite phenomenal what happens when you get a deep release of energy and you see a deep pattern, and that actually it can change. It can change then how we're behaving. So a couple of things here then, key learnings. Conscious thought is not the real problem or the real solution. So all of this talking, thinking, it's not got the answers we're looking for. It's a distraction. And every time you make something about something outside of you, you take away your power. You make yourself powerless. And the second thing is we can experience ourselves as energy. And when we do that, we open up greater wisdom, freedom, and liberation. So exciting. So let's have a look at emotional allergies. Part of the challenge for us, or part of the thing that keeps us in this repeating cycle, is that there are certain emotions that we have chosen. I am never feeling that again. So you could think of them like emotional allergies. Humiliation, shame, guilt, anger, a few examples. And I certainly know for me, humiliation was one that I had felt an awful lot as a child. And I was like doing everything I could to avoid that feeling. And there was also a lot of shame, a lot of guilt, a lot of anger, like these energies, and then us not wanting to feel them is what creates separation and keeps us, kind of locked down. So after I'd been in India, I came back and I wrote a book called Process and Prosper. And in there, I wrote it first off as a 7-step emotional processing practice. And then when I started working with people, that was where it condensed to the 4 steps. So it's the same method, but the 4 steps is a simplified version. And because I felt so free and liberated by it, and I just wanted everybody to know, you can grab a free copy there at wendyharrington.com/pp. Go there, you'll be able to download a free PDF of it so that you can have a look if you would like to. Let's have a look at the root of negative self-talk. So the problem is actually what I call the identity matrix. That unconsciously we are ruled by fear and limiting beliefs about ourselves and the world. And all negative self-talk is the voice of fear. So you can't change the ego, it is what it is, but you can see what it is, you can understand it, you can transcend it, so you can open up to the voice of love. And so that you can really break free of it and come into your divine expression that wants to pour forth through you. So the identity matrix is on page 5 of your workbook. And in each of the segments here, in one of them, I'd like you to write body. In another one, mind. And in another one, emotions. So you have a body, but you're not the body. You have a mind, but you're not the mind. You have emotions, but you're not the emotions. You exist beyond that. And that for me, I first glimpsed that when I had my near-death experience. And then when I'd been doing my psychology degree, actually, I'd started to question it, because one of the theories in psychology is just something that the brain does at that point in time. And I thought, well, maybe it is. And I obviously was on a cocktail of drugs as well. Who knows what that did to the brain functioning? And I began to question whether it was real or not. And then I went on a Tai Chi weekend retreat to this beautiful woods. And we ate our lunch in silence, and then we got up to do this exercise with a tree, where it was like, find a tree, put out your hands, close your eyes, and then just gently move your hands backwards and forwards. So I closed my eyes, and as I started to move my hands backwards and forwards, I just lost all sense of my separate self again. I met that same source of love that I did when I had my near-death experience. And the words for it were unconditional love. And I knew that everything came from it, and everything returned to it. It was so beautiful. And then my mind, because my mind is, likes to muck about, it kind of went, peace and love, man. And I feel like I went, donk, back into my body. But it was another glimpse and confirmation. No, there definitely is something greater. And then another experience I had many, but another one I'll share with you was I was vacuuming one day. And the interesting thing was, I thought I was quite awakened. So the ego mind is very good at kidding us. It's insidious and sneaky, and we can think that things are happening and they're absolutely, they're not, right? And so I thought I was in a really awakened state, and I was just vacuuming. And then all of a sudden I was aware, my awareness expanded, and my first thought was like, oh shit, I fell asleep again. And I thought I was awake. And I was absolutely aware of consciousness beyond this physicality that is a guide for this physicality. We could think of it like higher self, soul. And that I knew that, wow, could direct everything, for this personality. But if we think about the identity matrix, we're identified with the personality. And again, that is where we're identified, is what stops us experiencing this greater love. It's just phenomenal. It really is. So what we're talking about here, isn't it, is a paradigm shift, that we have this idea, a limited idea. I'm a student of A Course in Miracles, and in there it refers to it as the false self. What I loved about A Course in Miracles was it was the first thing I found that really fitted with the direct spiritual experiences that I've been having after I've been ill. And so what we need is this shift where we shift from this limited idea of ourselves into something greater. So a paradigm is, it's the pattern, it's the model, is formed by the beliefs. So all of that we have creates our experience, that creates our paradigm. Individually and collectively, paradigms exist, and that it's formed by beliefs. And this is where you are so powerful. What you believe becomes your experience. So if we believe that we are separate from Source, separate from God, then that is the experience that we have. And that's when we're living in, like we said, we're living in an outside-in reality instead of an inside-out reality. We're not realizing we're powerful. In fact, we feel powerless, don't we? And so the symptoms of the ego, because what we say is the ego is that false version of yourself, a limited version of yourself, the idea that I'm just this body and nothing else. And, the symptoms are, negative self-talk, procrastination, confusion, overwhelm. Maybe we're highly risk adverse, overeating, avoidance, fear, worry, doubt, to name a few. So if you're resonating with any of those, I certainly know they all resonate for me, at points in my life, that those things are all created by the ego. And the ego is not bad. It is a protective mechanism. We're going to look a bit more deeply at it. It is a coping mechanism and a survival mechanism. And so let's look at the root here, because we can't solve these things on the surface. Like these symptoms that we'll see, these are also, although we feel experiencing them in our behavior, they're at the level of the thinking. This is protecting something else. So none of this is ever the real problem. So let's look deeper. And this is invisible veil number 2. So the only thing that limits you is your ego, because it is a limited idea of you and what you are. And this is page 6 of your workbook, which we're going to fill in. We'll fill it in a bit. But first of all, we're going to have a look more at the ego. How does it arise? What is it? Where does it come from? And in A Course in Miracles, it talks of the ego inception. And I was really curious, like, where is that? Like, where does that happen? Where the ego comes into being? And what I want to share with you is that actually each lifetime, you create this limited version of yourself. When the separation from Source, from love itself comes and we meet fear. I'm going to talk a bit more about that. And you are meaning makers. We're all meaning makers. We're creating meaning. And the meaning that we give to things is the experience that we then have. So as a limitless being, you come, you are a limitless being. You are love, and that you're coming into this experience, and that when you're born, and it can happen really young, it can happen even in the womb, it can happen sometime after you've been born, that there's this experience of fear, because that is almost like I visualize almost like a veil over the earth, right? We're in this experience of fear. And so we come into that, we know ourselves as love, we know ourselves as oneness, we then, our parents, the culture we're in, and the caregivers, we meet these fearful experience, we're left to cry. That's the other thing. It doesn't have to be a highly traumatic thing, that any sense of separation from all this incredible love is highly traumatic. And so we come in and we get this experience, and then we give it meaning. So mine, for example, I was, when I discovered mine, I was 2 months old, and my mum had put me down to sleep, probably, right? But my arm was uncomfortable. And I was crying and I was left. And I knew my mum was there, but she was not coming. Now we know as like parenting styles, that was probably like put the baby down to cry, you know, the baby needs to sleep, leave it to cry, right? She didn't know my arm was uncomfortable. But for me, the meaning I created was, you know, I'm insignificant, I don't matter, you know, no one loves me, this is a scary place. And so all of that meaning gets created. And you may say, well, hang on a minute, Wendy, how on earth can you know from when you were 2 months? And this is where you just have to trust your unconscious mind and trust yourself that as you dive deeper, that your unconscious mind remembers everything. And that those memories can come back as you relax in and you allow those memories to come. And then, you know, I do a process where, you know, I ask you questions and you answer the questions and it just comes because you just know. And you have to put the ego mind aside, that, you know, the doubting mind aside, and trust. But the interesting thing is when you see the meanings you created, what you see is, wow, like that actually is the patterns that I've lived out throughout my life. And life is happening for us. So when we get triggered with something, so all triggers are gold. When something happens outside of ourselves that upsets us, I mean, triggers us, like makes us feel uncomfortable, it's offering us an opportunity to feel deeply so we can drop underneath that and then see the real thing, which has got us acting in separation. So insecurity, like we said before, or the, you know, lots of things in the ego's functioning, you know, judgment, condemnation, which is part of judgment, isn't it? Righteousness, like the fear of being wrong, the fear of being right, all these things which are in the functioning of the ego. And like we said, you know, it's a protection mechanism because you decided certain things and then it goes all out to protect them because you're a powerful creator. And so through a deep dive breakthrough process, we can discover what meaning did we give right at the beginning that I am living out, and then we can clear the energy of that in order to break free of that and become free, and to remember then your true self, to remember yourself as love, which then gives you the true contrast of like there truly is something else. And then you live into that and you cultivate that. It's really beautiful. So page 6 of your workbook. So the real root of self-sabotage is me. The real root of self-sabotage is me. We live in an inside-out reality. We live in an inside-out reality. Thought/belief becomes things. Thought/belief creates things. The formless comes before the form. The formless, so the invisible, the imagined, comes before the form. And I can choose to create from love or fear. I can choose to create from love or fear. And which mind am I in? Divine mind or personal mind? So am I in this oneness consciousness, this expanded consciousness, or am I in the personal mind, the separate mind, the idea, the fearful mind, the idea that I'm separate? So there's many false core beliefs that get created at the point of that ego inception. So I'm not worthy, I'm not good enough, I'm not wanted, I'm not loved, I'm powerless, and I'm not capable, to name just a few. And those you can see is why, I could not make sense of why I felt so unworthy and why I hated myself so much and all of that. It made no sense. And there was a point as well for me, I remember feeling really bad about myself in life, and I couldn't work that out either because I thought, well, I haven't done anything that bad. So it's these deep-seated ideas. It's the separation from source itself is what creates all our pain and suffering. And so if that's what creates it, the answer, of course, then is to return to experience and live with that love. Because otherwise we're looking in the wrong place. We're looking outside of ourselves. And so a couple of stories here. So one, I had a time where I felt truly dreadful about myself. I felt like I was the worst person on the planet. And I was really, really struggling. And I went to have some time with this amazing healer who was in the healing circle that I was in. You could go and stay with this lady for a few days. And little Martha was age 10 at the time. So Martha was at my mum's place and I was staying with this lady about a 5-hour drive away. She was sharing amazing things with me, really helping me with healing. But I reached that same point where I just felt so awful. I didn't know what to do with myself. And suddenly Martha was in my mind telepathically. And she said, you have to forgive yourself, Mummy. And I said, I don't know how, telepathically. And she said, see yourself how I see you. See yourself with my eyes. And in that moment, I felt this most amazing love. I mean, it was just, and I know it was like the love of God, the love of Source, not just Martha. But the love was so profound. And here's what I knew. I knew I could kill every single person on the planet and I would still be loved. Like there was nothing so bad that I could do that would mean that I was not loved. And that to me is the love of God, the love of Source. It is non-judgmental. It is non-punishing. We are just loved. And love is the thing which transforms all things. It was just phenomenal to feel that. And that experience was amazing, but I still had it as this idea that it was something outside of me. Yeah, I mean, we're so embedded, aren't we? Whether we're religious or not, we'll have picked up things in the culture and, all of these stories and ideas. And then another story, then a bit later after that, I had a brief romance with somebody that hadn't quite gone as I'd expected. And he kept sort of coming forward and then going backwards. And in the end, I said, hey, look, don't worry about it. Let's just be friends. And I didn't mind that much. But there was a little bit of me that thought, well, like, why does no one love me? And I went to bed that night and I just asked God, Source, I said, like, what is this shit? Because I am so bored of it. Will you please show me what is going on? And I went to sleep. And in the morning, I got up and I got in the shower. And all of a sudden, I was flooded with love inside, from the inside. And I remember thinking, it's inside me. This love that I have been looking for all these years, thinking another person had it, it is inside of me, as it is inside of you. So we are the source of love itself. The divine God, Source, whatever you want to call it, it dwells within us and we are one with it. Isn't that amazing? Like, what planet, what is the planet going to be like as our consciousness raises and we all start to live in this place? Makes for a very, very different experience of life. And what's beautiful is that as your awareness expands, that there's a wonderful phrase actually from Zen, and it says, before enlightenment, drink tea. After enlightenment, drink tea. And I think it's the most beautiful phrase because often I think the ego mind is looking for something, it's looking for like, whoa, lights or a near-death experience. People often say to me, I haven't had a near-death experience. I'm like, you don't need one. You don't need one. You can experience it now. Don't do anything dramatic like that. It's unnecessary. And so this is accessible and available to all of us, which is just so incredible, isn't it? I absolutely love it. So just looping back to these, can you see the idea that I'm not worthy is an absolute fallacy? I'm not good enough. I'm not wanted. I'm not loved. Now, I'm not saying that your experience that you came into didn't feel like that, and that isn't what you experienced. Many of us have experienced highly traumatic things, trauma in our childhoods, abandonment, mistreatment. So I don't take anything away from that, but just consider that if the core belief creates the experience, that we continue to live something that perhaps we do not need to live. And so these things, when you realize that, you are love itself, how could you not be worthy? It's incredible, isn't it? But it's so deeply in there, isn't it? It's so deeply ingrained. But let's call it out. Let's call it into question. Let's see it. And then we can start to create something different. Protective patterns. So these beliefs are there, and then we get these protective patterns. Perfectionism, responsibility, feeling we've got to save everyone, abandonment, hiding, staying small, and various other ones. These protective patterns. These resonating with you? And again, they're just protection for what is underneath. They're protection of that idea underneath. which, like we're saying, fundamentally is not actually even true, but it feels true, doesn't it? So when we decide we're not worthy, not loved, etc., we go into these unwinnable games. You know, we're desperately looking for love outside of ourselves. We may feel our hearts hurt, so we attempt to keep ourselves safe by not getting too close to people, or leaving a relationship, getting out first, things like that. There was lots of patterns like this that I was doing, you know, desperately wanting love, but then creating drama and creating suffering and not welcoming in the love, not allowing love, not feeling like anybody could really love me because, of course, I didn't love myself. So we get caught in all these unwinnable games. So you can't fix the ego. It is, but what we can do is when we see it for what it is, then something, it can start to open up, and we can start to move beyond its fear, beyond the judgment. So there's nothing to get rid of. The ego mind is not bad, it's not wrong, it just is. It is simply how it functions. And, you know, the saying, what you resist persists. So we need to have no thought of killing it off. It is a wonderful thing when it is the servant and not the master. And so we need to realize the part of us that is the master. And what we're saying, we can understand its functioning and awaken to our true selves. So this is Yamini, and Yamini said after her breakthrough session, you know, I don't feel like anything is bothering me anymore. And she told me that she just has this real sense of confidence now. She said, I've been trying to be confident my whole life, but this natural confidence has just arisen, because as your true self, there is a natural confidence that exists there. It's really beautiful. So the breakthrough process that is all about helping you to get that direct experience beyond all the noise which is keeping you from it, that direct experience of your true self. And, you know, none of this is an intellectual concept. We cannot get to God, source, through the intellect. It is an experiential thing. So we've looked at emotional processing. We've looked at the ego release. We're looking at that ego inception piece. We're also looking at starting to just see it for what it is, starting to see its patterns, its protective patterns, looking deeper. We've talked a little bit, haven't we, about energy, and that, you know, we are energy beings, and that we can start to, you know, rather than just being a head on a stick when we're caught in our intellect, we can come in and we can just start to experience ourselves as energy more, and that opens up a whole new world for us too. And that also the emotions, we can start to see the emotions as energy, as sensations in the body, rather than emotion that we're trying to attach to a story. Faith is interesting for me because there is something greater. For me, it's been the hardest thing to come to because of being very anti-religion, not understanding why people were killed in the name of God, just not getting that. But I feel like love is at the heart of all things, and I don't dismiss anything now either. I feel it's at the heart of all religions, and there is a faith that we can have. I think many people these days, is a growing subset of us who are spiritual but not religious, that faith in something greater, and that we can begin to rest into surrender of that and surrender into it, whereas the ego functions in control. Forgiveness is a really important aspect. If you think about it, everything we don't forgive, we are on some level, you know, we're condemning, and that means then that we are creating separation. And like we said, the real root is the separation from source God itself is the real root of our struggling and our suffering. And so forgiveness gives us this wonderful, I mean, to me, it really is like such a radical process, radical forgiveness. You know, Course in Miracles says your job is to forgive the whole world. So this forgiveness of everything is where you find your true freedom. And it takes you beyond the judgment, because any kind of judgment creates separation. And embodiment, we touched on embodiment a little bit, didn't we, when I was sharing those stories with you, with the breathing exercises and the memories held in the body. We've also talked about it when we've talked about the emotional processing, that we're using the body, coming out of the thinking and using the body instead to process energy. And there's lots of other stuff you can do to connect with the body and begin to become more embodied, because really, you know, this is a journey, you know, this is a journey from head to heart. There is wisdom in the heart. There is wisdom in the gut. Science is now showing, that there are, all these nerve cells and firing, in the heart, in the gut. So there's wisdom there. And, the heart has wonderful wisdom, as does the gut. And so the more we come into the body, the more we stop over-analyzing, overthinking, and we gently let go of that, we start to realize I can trust something deeper within me. Then we open up, and an embodiment is a wonderful way to help you with that. I was saying when we were looking at the identity matrix that it's a misidentification that keeps us limited. And when we put people into roles, there's like the roles here of like people pleaser, rebel, caretaker, rescuer. Those are roles that we take on ourselves in order to survive. But the roles go beyond that too, as well. Mother, father, sister, boss, whatever roles we may put each other into, we create a lot of thinking around that. So I remember a few years ago thinking, I just want to see souls. I want to see the truth of people beyond the mask, beyond the surface, beyond the boxes, because all roles, they put us into boxes, and, we are limitless beings. So I invite you within yourself to think more about souls and not roles. And it's really helpful when we're thinking about forgiveness and we're thinking about those people that have wronged us, maybe like parents, lovers, spouses, whoever it may be, and that we start to release that person from the role, so we can see, this is just a soul here like me, having this human experience, really doing the best that they can with the knowledge and wisdom that they have at the time, as everybody always is. So forgiveness and faith, I kind of touched on that a moment ago. Forgiveness is so powerful for your freedom. It is just incredibly transformational what it can bring about. And this is not one human being forgiving another human being. True forgiveness is when we're calling on that which is greater to assist us and help us to see differently, to release any blame or judgment that we have, and instead see with eyes of compassion, things like that. And A Course in Miracles says, it cannot teach you what love is, for that is impossible, but it is designed to clear the blocks to love's presence. So that's what I'm sharing with you here. I can't teach you what love is, because that is impossible. You can experience it and then you will know it. But what I can show you is these are the things that get in the way, and this is how we get them out of the way. And that there's something greater that is going to help us with all of that. There's also a lovely bit in A Course in Miracles where it says, like, your part to play is your willingness to want to, and the rest is done for you. Isn't that beautiful? So this is a testimonial from one of my lovely clients, Helena, who said, I feel like the shackles have come off when it comes to my potential. Without the baggage, I'm free to show up in the best possible way that I can, without the negative self-talk holding me back. I'm less triggered, I'm holding things lightly and facing things that I was avoiding. I feel in flow, and I now have a toolkit to move through whatever comes up, which is just amazing. It's so amazing to feel unshackled. That's like the best feeling. You need to mind the gap. What I mean here is intellectual knowledge alone is not enough to create change. This is why you may have lots of spiritual intellectual knowledge. I see this a lot. I see it in myself. So I have no judgment of it. But we often think we really get something, but it's not quite fully embodied. It's not fully on the deepest level. So it's always really good to, to really question, am I really living this? Am I at peace right now? Your peace is like your biggest indicator of how much, you are living this. And, how you feel doesn't lie. So it's really good to, I mean, it may be a lie, but it's always real. It's always showing you what's there. So if you're not at peace, then there's something going on that's in the way of that. And sometimes as well, like, what you consciously aware of is not what you really believe. So there can be something on the surface in your intellect, but deep inside, you don't really believe that. So like we were saying, if we're running these patterns, like, the I'm not worthy, I'm not good enough, it just sets up these patterns and programs. And if we're running those, even though this is why sometimes affirmations don't work for us, because we say them, but they're just on the surface, and the deeper part of ourselves does not agree with it. So we need to be able to access that deeper part, and we do that through clearing energy so that we can get there to allow truth to arise. And Sarah examples this really beautifully, actually, because she's a behavioral change specialist who was feeling stuck. So, of course, she was, beating herself up a lot, thinking that, well, I really should know better, because she had a lot of wonderful and very helpful intellectual knowledge, but there was still something deeper going on underneath. So now she says a new way has genuinely been born, and it's so comfortable, so natural. I almost can't reconcile what I feel now to how I lived. So it's really, yes, this brand new way opening up within you. So what's next for you? You have 3 choices right now. You can do nothing. Maybe you don't feel that this was really a fit for you, which is totally cool. Thank you for tuning in. You maybe on the second thing, you're going to do this by yourself, which is totally fine too. I hope that I have empowered you, given you some glimpses of some tools and a sense of which direction to go in. Or option 3 is you can let me help you. I offer coaching and support to help people to do this deep processing, awaken to their true selves, heal the things which are in the way of that, lift those veils. So if that feels like something that you would like to explore, then please, there's a link below where you can book a call and we can have a quick chat to see whether this might be something that might be a good fit for you. And finally, just to say thank you so much for listening to this masterclass. I hope that it has been beneficial for you and insightful for you. If you have enjoyed it and you have got insight from it, please do pass it on. Share it with people that you know would benefit from understanding that there's lots that they can do to discover the true power within themselves. I am so passionate that we all come to a place of peace within ourselves, because that is what changes the world. Thank you so much for listening. Bye for now.